Hi everyone, it's Emily, and I just wanted to pop in here and share a little bit about what I'm starting to do in my garden. Now it's getting closer to springtime. In my last video, I talked all about what seeds I'm growing and kind of my plan for my garden this year. This video, I'm going to be talking about what seeds I'm going to be starting to plant in March, early April to get my garden ready for to be planted into the garden. So a little bit about my garden. If you missed it in the last video, I am in Northeast Ohio. So I'm in zone 6A, 6B. Our last frost date is late April, early May, but I'm probably not going to be planting anything outside until probably the first or second week of May, just to be safe, to make sure we're not getting any frost at night and that ruins my plants. Last year in May, we got snow on Mother's Day, so it did ruin a lot of people's strawberry plants and other plants that were already starting to bloom at that time around this area. So I definitely don't want that to happen to my plants. So I'm really this year trying to plan ahead and also keep track of everything too, so that I can go back years from now and see what has worked for me and what hasn't, and things will get easier year after year after year as I have this nice plan created. Like I said, all these plants are going to be started inside. I'm going to be starting them it's March 7th right now, so I'm probably going to be starting them this weekend around March 15th-ish, and the next week or so after that. I have a lot of plants that I'm starting, so they're not all going to be planted this weekend just because it's a lot of work and I work full-time and I'm busy. And it's going to take a while for these plants to get started, and it's still only March. So I'm just trying to be patient with myself. I do want to get everything planted, but I gotta have this balance or it's not gonna be fun, and I don't want gardening to be like a job for me because I love it so much and it just gives me so much peace. So I'm not trying to rush things, and I'm trying to learn from my garden. So it's okay to make mistakes because everything's a learning experience, and once you make a mistake, you learn from it and you'll just get better after that. So don't be too hard on yourself. So the way that I'm starting my seeds, I already went to the garden store this past weekend and got a lot of my supplies. I got some dirt, some potting soil. I do like to get some potting soil as I'm starting seeds, just because it helps with hydration, and our change in temperature just fluctuates so much. So it gives me some ease, as sometimes I don't have as much time to take a look at my plants and water them. So it gives just some fluctuations of tenderness. Also, I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Charles Downing on YouTube, but he's another gardener, and he has a lot of great YouTube videos for beginner gardeners and how to start your seeds. So last year, when he talks about succession planting, which plant a few things of this and then a few more a few weeks later, so you have a continued harvest throughout the whole season. But two, he when he starts his seeds, he starts them in so say you got tomatoes. So this one tomato I'm gonna put in a little circle container or square container like this, and I'm gonna put maybe 15 seeds all together in the same container about this big. And then as those seeds start to sprout, I'll pull some up, the ones that are nice and big and strong, and put them in their own little containers or a little bigger soil. And I'll keep doing that until I get to the number of plants that I want to plant, and two, until I decide okay, this is all the plants, I'm good, they're all ready, these are all doing great, we're keeping all of these. That one helps later on, so you don't have to pull one out and thin them all out. So you're kind of thinning everything first at the very beginning. Two, if you plant in little tiny containers all separate, you don't risk a couple not germinating and then you have no seeds left. So that's what I'm doing to a lot of my plants. So I'm gonna start them all together and then I'll put them in bigger pots as they start growing. Like my tomatoes last year, I started them really tiny. Then I moved them to square soil blocks. They were like 1-inch soil blocks. And then I moved them to red Solo cups. And then they got planted into the ground after that. Gardening does not need to be perfect, and you don't need to have the best perfect supplies. Literally, like I tried to garden on the cheap. I love using the red Solo cups. It was such a cheap container to use and they were so easy. All I did was buy like 2 big packs of cups, and I got a drill and I drilled a hole or 2 in the bottom of each cup so that they would drain. And they worked perfect, especially for all my tomato plants and my pepper plants. They did so amazing and thrived in them. And they were perfect because my tomato plants were starting to get big by that time, because I planted them probably mid-May, almost beginning of June, outside into the garden, especially pepper plants, because pepper plants hate the cold. So if you put them out too early, they will literally just freeze and they will not grow at all. So the red Solo cups are amazing. If you notice that when you're starting to plant in your containers at first, as you're sprouting your seeds, you might notice some of your plants are getting leggy, where they're just like going straight up, and some are super tall. That means that they need a bigger container because they need more nutrients. So that is a time to put them in a bigger container. So that's why I like to start small, work my way up with them, even though I am transferring them multiple times. Tomato and pepper plants are, they're okay with being moved around. Herbs are a little bit harder. So if you are gonna start herbs, start them in one container and keep them in that container going forward. So plants I'm gonna be starting this week. Broccoli and cauliflower, cabbage, kale, sugar peas, and onions. Again, these are probably not going to be planted till later later April. A lot of these plants are like cold hardy plants, except for probably my onions, which my onions I'm planting earlier this year because I want to try to get them a bit bigger and get bigger bulbs before I put them into the ground to see if that will yield a bigger onion and a bigger harvest. So I'm going to be planting a lot of onions this year, about 800 onions, because I really loved all the onions that we got last year, and I ran out of the last of our storage onions in January, and I really wish I would have grew more because the quality of the onions right now at the grocery store are just not the same. They really aren't. They are rotting so fast and they're very soft and watery. And you can just tell they're not a good quality onion. And I've tried to get them from a few different stores and they're all the same. So I'm not sure what's going on with our onion production. Once it does start to get a bit warmer outside, and kind of the frost at night is starting to wane a bit, some crops that I am going to be starting outside directly into the soil are going to be spinach, arugula, carrots, and beets. Those are going to be really the only plants that I'm going to direct seed into the soil. Maybe one other one would be corn. I would direct seed. But yeah, those are the main ones that will get planted directly into the soil because they do better that way. Yeah. So it does sound like a lot, but just take your time, learn. Last year I didn't plant all these at the beginning. Oh, sorry, 2 of the biggest ones that I'm going to be starting this next week are tomatoes and peppers. So I have, if you go look at my last video, I have about 6 different tomatoes and probably 6 different peppers that I'm going to be planting. Those are probably the biggest producers in my garden aside from maybe beans. Because I love to can tomatoes, and we canned peppers last year, and pickles, which were really good too, which I can't wait to do those, but those ones will get planted later on in April. So again, here's what I'm going to be starting in my house in the next week or so would be broccoli and cauliflower, cabbage, onions, kale, sugar peas, and then tomatoes and peppers. Those are all going to be started inside in the next week or so. And so this is going off of my zone. So my zone says that I really can't be planting things outside until late April, May. So then I went back and looked at how long it would take for all these seeds to germinate and get to a good size for me to plant them outside. So I kind of like worked back in time, subtracted back from that. So that's what I'm starting this month. And then once I start planting this weekend in my containers, I'll take you along so you can see the process of exactly how I'm gardening and what I've learned works best for me and the plants that I'm planting. So if you have any questions, or if you're starting your seeds this weekend, comment below. I'm excited to hear what you're starting and share my journey. Also, side note, there's something really exciting coming in the next week or so, and they are going to be little babies. What do you think it is? Can you comment below and guess?